the verse number 17 and 18 of the chapter 10 of the Bhagavad Gita. And we had done the Sankara Bhashya. There was a little of the Madhusudana Bhashya left, Madhusudana Tika commentary left, Twadi, Lakshanam Aishwaryati Sayam Vibhutim. So your magical thing, the yoga thing, as well as all your Aishwarya, okay, and yogam and vibhuti, all these. What are the these infinite powers and energies and magical impact that you have? Sarvajnatva, Sarva Saktitva Adi. Bhagavan is all knowledgeable. He knows everything. He's omniscient. He's also omnipotent. Sarva Sakti Mat. And then he is also sort of Sarva Vidyaman, isn't it? All that, this is the lakshana. That is the way we describe you, because you cannot be captured in words. And then he says, Atisayam vibhutim cha dhyana lambaram. Why am I so keen to know about you? Why do I need to know you with different names and forms? You have already said you are Param Brahman. No, because I'm a little dull minded. I'll find it easier to meditate on you with a few names and forms and remember that you are in fact this Brahmaloka by meditating on me, and then you will get final release. Amrita vat pade pade swadu swadu. He's sort of making it very poetic. He's saying, look here, what is that tripti alam pratya? Oh, I'm happy, nothing more is required, but you don't have that. Okay, so then he has the desire to know more, and therefore he's not very contented. He wants it more. Why? Because whatever I have heard, it's great, it's very sweet. But if you're given few rasagolas, certain times you want a little more because it's very tasty, isn't it? Similarly, God's words are so sweet to the ears of Arjuna. He's saying, I've heard, but I'm not very contented because I want to hear more about yourself. Because it's so sort of soothing truth. Because it tells me, it removes all my agonies about life. So why don't you please tell me? And it's so tasty, your words. They're full, so full of nectar. Atra tvada vakyam iti anuktehe apanutya atisayokti rupaka sankaro ayam madhurya atisayano bhavena utkantita atisayam vyanakti. He's basically saying, in a way, Madhusudana is giving a context to this whole conversation. I was mentioning that there is that madhurya bhava. Even in a relationship, it is a good example of the loving relationship between a teacher and a student. And that is what Madhusudana is kind of bringing in. He's saying that, uh, you know, this whole particular thing, that is he repeating it? No, no, it's not a repetition. It's not to create more boredom. But this particular thing, and he's making it a little, what do you call it? Alankarika, as they call it in literature. So he sort of wants to capture that emotion, and therefore he's giving it a tripti sunoto naste me mritam. He's saying it looks like this whole thing, and he's bringing in a few literary technicalities as to why it sort of is expressing the utkantha or deep aspiration and that restlessness of a student who hear it again lest he forgets it. That's sort of a beautiful moment where the student is very deeply and attentively listening to the teacher, and that's what he's bringing in here. Nothing of much greater import than that. And then Bhagavan is sort of responding to whatever he has mentioned. And let's look at how Bhagavan sort of responds. Now, I tell you, rest of the chapter would be kind of repetition and details. So all you have to do right now is sort of pay greater attention and be a little more attentive to the two yeah, first three verses in a way. Or first two is also good, okay? For 19th and 20th and 21st verses. If you pay a little attention to the commentary on it and what Bhagavan wants to say, the rest of it will be kind of, it's like an assembly line production. It's more and more of expansive details, not more fundamental introduction of any new truths about himself. So let's look carefully about the verse number 19 and 20, which is an introduction to Bhagavan's words about himself, which he is going to repeat again and again by referring to different aspects. Antate kathayishyami divya hyatma vibhutayah pradhanyatah kuru shrestha nastyanto vistarasyami ahamatma gudakesa sarvabhuta sayasthidah ahamadischa madhyam cha bhutanamanta eva cha adityanamaham vishnuhu ज्योतिषां रविरंशुमान् मरीचिर्मरुतामस्मि नक्षत्राणामहं शशि. You know, he is sort of first will make sense of it. But he is having three categories of students in his mind when he's making these three verses. And what are these qualities of the students he has in mind? One is the good students who are ready for a deeper dive into Vedantic secret about Brahman without name and form. So, meditation on Nirupadika Brahman. How do you meditate? Will he be able to tell you any pictures, any details about that? No. So, he'll give some lakshana so that you will meditate on lakshya, like Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi. So, these sentences don't talk about Brahman, they are sort of leading you to an idea of what that Brahman is so that you can continue to meditate on it to reach that level at the deepest meditation and the long process we have discussed in chapter 6 and chapter 7 and 8 and 9. He has kept on mentioning that. Okay. Hantate. Hanta means what? Hanta means he's saying, okay, idanim, right now. And certain other sort of interpreters have mentioned that your mind is very dull and therefore he's saying, okay, acha, kind of thing, idani. Hantate kathashyami. So it's kind of, Bhagavan is saying, okay, I've heard your questions and now I'm going to deal with your queries in detail. So he's saying, hantate, to you, kathashyami, I shall speak. About what? Divya hi atma vibhutaya. So my atma vibhutis, my greatness, and my ability to sort of multiply and manifest and do everything, which sort of puts you in a sense of deep wonder. You get flabbergasted. You look at it with a deep sense of wonder. And I want to tell you, however, he gives a qualified. He gives a sort of an indication that he's not going to, because he has asked what? Asesataha. Bistarena asesataha. Tell me in great detail without leaving anything. Bhagavan says that's not possible. Why? He's saying pradhanyataha. I'll only mention about the key vibhutis of mine. Why? Nasti anto vistarasya me. Because if I try to speak to you in great detail, your life is not enough, not one life, but maybe millions of lives you have to take because there's no end to the number of vibhutis I have. I can talk about the solar system, then I can talk about, the galaxies, and there are billions of galaxies now. Some people say there are 200 billion galaxies. I don't know how many are there. And then he'll go on talking about different aspects. The physical universe, all the studies that we have done so far, all the fields of study that we have, it's all about what? It's all about different aspects of God's vibhutis. We are exploring through our science. There's no end to his greatness. Therefore, he says there's no end to it. So I am going to tell you who am I in in a very so he's in a way is Arjuna has reason to get disheartened because Bhagavan has already done that. He has done it in a sankipta way, in a very brief way. He has already explained who is he in chapter 7, 8, and 9. Now he's again saying, I can speak to you only by emphasizing on my key vibhutis, not all of it, because there's no end to it. So Arjuna has to sort of know that, and that's also, in science, for example, and logic, there's something called deductive logic, right? So out of a certain premise, you deduce certain conclusions. As they call it in a priori method. And then there is something called posteriori, or what is based on certain facts. So some things have happened, and you are deducing a conclusion. And there is something called what Kant talked about as synthetic a priori. I'm not getting to the technicalities. There is something called inductive method. So what you are looking at 5, 6, 7 instances, and based on that, you have a generalized theory. That's what is briefly, in a layman's language, the inductive method. In a way, Bhagavan is mentioning, look here, Why didn't you then rely on the inductive method? Because you cannot actually know everything that I do. Philosophically, deductive, yes, you can do, but you are not bright enough. In that sense, I will tell you certain key vibhutis I have, because if you want to know the whole universe through a descriptive body of knowledge about who am I and what I do and what I can do, I'm sorry, your time is not so unlimited. Okay, so that is what he mentions in verse number 19, and we'll go to how he explains. So just quickly, let's first look at verse number 19, what Sankaracharya says. Or we can do the other thing that we can, yeah, so let's do that way, that is easier and better maybe. So hanta te iti, hanta idanim, hanta means idanim, te tava divya divi भवा आत्मविभूतयः आत्मनो ममो विभूतयो यस्माः याः ताः कथयिष्यामि इति एतत् प्राधान्यतो यत्र यत्र प्रधाना या विभूतिः तां तां प्रधानं प्रधान्यतः कथयिष्यामि अहं। हे कुरुश्रेष्ठ, अशेषस्तु वर्षशतेनापि न शक्या वक्तुं यतोः नास्ति अन्तविस्तरस्य मे विभूतीनाम् इत्यर्थः. So he very simply, what I mentioned, he's just telling in Sanskrit. He's saying even if you take hundreds of years, you cannot know. I cannot talk about all my details. In detail, I cannot tell you about all my vibhutis, my magical powers and their manifestations and how they sort of work out in reality. And therefore, what I'll do is that these Divya Vibhutis that I have, these magical powers and their manifestations, we can focus on the key ones. The rest you presume. You can work on them yourself. So, ya pradhana, whatever are key important ones, that's what I'm going to mention. Okay? And asesastu, the verse says, I mean, if I want to tell you exhaustively, that is not possible. That is what he mentions. And there is nothing, wait, okay, we'll go to the next verse, but let's look at Madhusudana if he's bringing in anything. Okay, hanta te kate shame divya yatmabu. Hanta iti anamoto yat tvaya prarthitam tat karishyami ma vyakula bhuhu iti Arjuna sam aswasya Arjunam sam aswasya tadeva kartum arabhate. So he's just kind of giving an account that the Bhagavan is giving a reassurance to Arjuna that yes, I'm going to talk about in response to the questions you have raised. In a very exhaustive manner, not possible. However, we will do in greater detail than we have done in chapter 7 and 8 and 9. We will not be doing any repetitions and we cannot do it exhaustively. However, we will do greater justice so that you understand it better. Okay? Katheshami pradhanyatah ta vibhuti ya divya hi prasiddhya. So, what are the greatest and well-known vibhutis I have? What are the divya vibhutis I have? That I'm going to tell you. Atmano mama asadharana vibhutayo ek visishta. So first of all, I'll mention these two aspects he's giving. There are many sadharana vibhutis, many general manifestations of my grace and my power. These are not things that we're going to waste my time on, but what you call my salient, what are the most important ones that I'm going to tell you. Vistaranatu kathanam Sakyam. It's not easy to talk about in detail. Yataha nasti anto vistarasya me vibhutinam. There is no end to how much I can go on about my greatness. Ada pradhana bhuta kasya deva vibhuti vakshami ityarthaha. So therefore, I am going to only tell you about the most important ones. Okay. Now comes the most important verse in this 10th chapter. That is the 20th verse. Please pay attention. Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarvabhuta Sayastitaha. So this is for the brighter students. Uttama Adhikari. Uttama Adhikari is what? He has the eligibility to be able to reflect on the Nirupadik of Brahman. So he is definitely having a Sukshma Buddhi Sampannata. He has a sharp mind. Why? He has done a lot of punya. And how? Because a lot of Nishkama Karma, Ishwara Arpana, and all that purva karma that he has done, as a result of which his mind is very clean and is very sharp, and therefore he's a uttam adhikari. He has already done Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. He can actually reflect on my Nirupadika Swabhava. Nirupadhika Rupata. Then how does he say? Aham Atma. Because as I told you, you want to meditate on it, that Nirupadhika thing, you cannot meditate on it. It will be Vicharatmaka. It will be analytical, as they call it also in Buddhist meditations. It's analytical meditation. It's not thinking about a flower or a lamp or anything. No, that is the, or meditating on your breath. No, it's not like that. You're doing constant analysis of refuting what is false and accepting what is true and rejecting a lot of things and cleaning up your consciousness. The process is very slow, but it's very stable, because other tantric and yogic methods, they take you to a very high level and you fall down very quickly. Vedanta takes you to a high level very slowly, because it cleanses your, all the back rooms, your garage and everything, your garden, everything. It cleans up slowly the whole system, and then only sort of your mind becomes clean. That's what he's saying. Aham Atma Gudakesha. Hey Gudakesha is addressing Arjuna as Gudakesha. Hey Gudakesha. Aham Atma. I'm the self. What kind of self? Where am I? Sarva Bhuta Sayastita. I am that consciousness, Pratyak Chaitanya. I'm the Antaryami. I'm present in all bhutas, living, non-living, in all the human beings. I'm there. Okay. Titaha. Aham Adishcha Madhyam Cha Bhutanam Anta Eva Cha. I am the beginning. I'm the middle part. I'm the end. What is the Adi? The Srishti Prakriya. That means Upadana Karana. I'm the material cause of this universe, out of which everything has manifested. Bhagavan has clarified that by saying that these eight are my Apara Prakriti and this is my Para Prakriti. What was he trying to explain? He was saying that I'm the Upadana, Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karana. So I don't have any clay out of which I create man or anything. No, it's just my wish. I don't need any material. There is no material outside of me. There is nothing outside of me. That's what Bhagavan says here. Aham Adihi. So I'm the beginning of everything. Madhyam cha. What is the Madhya? The Sthiti Kala. Upadana and Sthiti Kala. So I'm also the Bharta. I maintain everyone, isn't it? So I'm the Upadana Karana. I'm also the sustainer of everything that you see. Like, for example, you're living. I give birth to you. Then I'm also responsible for your continuity as a living being. Bhutanam anta eva cha. And I'm also the pralaya karana. So the udbhava, sthiti, and pralaya. Beginning, continuation, and termination. They come to me, come out of me, and they exist also in me. They have nothing without me. They can, you cannot think about this whole human beings or animals or the whole these creation, this whole universe without me. Comes out of me, goes into me, exists in me. Okay, now look at these two verses, and then in the next verse we'll do it together. Adityanam aham Vishnu. Among the Adityas, and we'll do in detail who is Aditya. Among the Adityas, I am the Vishnu. My name is Vishnu. I'm one of the Adityas. Yotisham Ravi Angshuman. So I am Ravi, Angshuman, Yotisham, all the Prakashaka, all that illuminate. I'm the most luminous. Angshuman. Angshuman is you know, the person who is full of those blazing rays. Angshu is the sunlight. Marichihi Marutam Asmi. Among the Maruts, I'm Marichihi, and he's one of the brightest, the sharpest. We'll discuss about this whole story about Maruta. It's a story, interesting story. And Nakshetranam Aham Sasi. This is kind of an anticlimax from a scientific point of view, because he's saying among the stars, I'm Sasi because the Sasi or the moon is brighter, is bigger, right? At night, what gives you light at Chanakya says is only moon which gives you light. So you might have 100 suns, only one sort of bright one will sort of take care of your whole family or family tree or whatever. That was one of his statements somewhere. I don't remember the whole couplet though. Naketranam aham sasi. But as students of physics, you already know that it's a very tiny thing called moon, because if you look at the whole thing, the stars are multiple times bigger than the sun. Sun is just a average star, isn't it? So we now know that the stars are far greater, far bigger. But in terms of proximity, in terms of how much light they give, even though it may be a small thing, a satellite of Earth is the moon, which has tremendous impact on you. It's like you have a university which is few countries away from your house, and then you have a university which is very close to your house. What has the maximum impact on your intellectual growth is the university close by. So he says, Nakshatra aham sasi. Here, all the twinkling stars, all the sources of light at night, amongst them, I'm the brightest, I'm the moon. That's what I'm saying. Now, what is the Vedantic secret here that we are going to elaborate on? We are not doing that tika but I was looking at Sankarananda here, some beautiful way in which he's sort of trying to make sense of these verses. He's saying that Bhagavan is talking about himself in a little philosophical way in verse number 20 because he has in his audience or in his mind brighter ones or uttama adhikaris, the ones who have the ability to reflect on him in an analytical philosophical way. So he's saying aham atma gudakesha, ko gudakesha, aham atma sarva bhuta sayastita. So I am present in all of you. What is he talking about? He's talking about the Pratyak Chaitanya, that consciousness which pervades all of us and present in all of us. And that is the secret of Vedanta, that we sort of appear as conscious because actually we are reflecting that consciousness which is one. And looking at the limitation of the body and the mind, this pure consciousness gets delimited and appears with a name and a form in each of us. But Bhagavan is saying that I'm in all of you as a kind of a silent witness. He's talking about himself as a witness self, which doesn't interfere with anything that we do. It keeps watching everything that happens because that is that pure consciousness without a name and a form. And much of Vedanta sort of deals with it. So he says that this particular sentence is definitely not meant for the average student. It meant for the Uttama Adhikari. And then you have the Madhyam Adhikari. Who is he? He's the Madhyam Adhikari who will like to meditate on Bhagavan as Ishvara, as Sopadika. The first one is Nirupadika, without name and form. Second one is with name and form. And what is that? He's saying Aham Adishya Madhyam Cha Bhutanam Anta Evacha. So he is now looking at the Brahman, at the ultimate self, the pure self, not as pure, but as a causal factor behind all that appears, all that exists, and all that dies or gets terminated, all that perishes. It perishes into that. So it's that kind of a fulcrum, kind of that central axis around which this whole universe revolves. But this is Sopadika. There's a point because he wants to meditate on it. So it's kind of less abstract, but not completely dull material image on which he's meditating. He's meditating on Bhagavan or intending to meditate on Bhagavan as Ishvara, who is the cause of all causes. Okay, that is for the Madhyamadhikari. What about the people who are a little dull minded, who cannot understand this? Okay, for them I appear in different names and forms. Then Bhagavan is saying for the Adhamadhikaris or the dull minded ones that I am Vishnu among the Adityas and I am among all the luminous ones, I'm Ravi or the sun. And I'm Marichihi among all that, Marut is kind of refers to wind energy. Amongst them, I'm Marichihi, the sharpest, the fiercest. And then among the nakshatras, whatever sort of the glimmer at night, I am the moon. I'm the brightest amongst them. These are basically three categories of students looking for different ways in which to meditate on Bhagavan, and Bhagavan is mentioning that, okay, in beautiful way. Now, these three verses alone categorize the vibhutis of Bhagavan in three categories, and Bhagavan is mentioning. Now we'll go on and on for the adhamas. So it will be very easy for us, and we'll just kind of stay through that when we start tomorrow. Now, let's look at how sort of Sankaracharya goes forward with it. Tatra pradhanam eva tavat sunut. Oh, dear friend, listen to me. Aham atma pratyagatma. I'm that pratyagatma. Atma eva. but I'm existing in all of you. So what is Pratyak and Parag? Pratyak is intimate, non-different, very close to you. Parag is which is distant, which is external, which is physical. So I'm that Sukshma, I'm the witness self, Paragatma, Gudakesha. And Gudakesha is not, I am Gudakesha, no, Bhagavan isn't saying. Of course, maybe you can also say he's Gudakesha. But you know what is the meaning of Gudakesha? Gudakesha can have two meanings and it's mentioned here. Gudaka means Nidra. Gudaka means, sleep. Tasya Isho, god of sleep. What does it mean? Not insomniac, but it's this person, Arjuna, is kind of Jita Nidraha. He had controlled, he had completely overcome um, that whole tamasic energical sleep. He could remain awake for days. Like in Ramayana, we hear that Lakshmana hadn't slept and hadn't eaten for 14 years. So when there was this need for somebody to kill Indrajit, Indrajit had a blessing that he shall be killed by only people who haven't eaten or slept for long years, something like that. And then Arjuna, Lakshmana says, I can do it because I have never had any food. He said, you never had food? I said, no, I never ate. And you didn't sleep? He said, no, because you and Sita Mataji, you were there. I was on guard, so I never slept. So that is what it mentions. Okay. So here Arjuna is kind of has completely overcome tamas. You can also say that, and control over sleep, because you know that he sort of addressed Urvashi, who approached him for love, his mother, isn't it? And then he won over so much of gold in the war, and it handed over to Yudhishthira for the Ashwamedha Yajna. So he was kind of beyond the senses. And look at his vairagya, that he wins over a beautiful girl in that Swayambara, in the competition. The mother says, share it. He could have said, no, I'm sorry, mom. That's none of your business to get into adult affairs. He could have said it, but he didn't say it. It's funny that other brothers didn't refuse to accept Draupadi as a wife, because the order was not to them. The order was to Arjuna, that you please share whatever Viksha you have got. And then others would have said, but we are not sharing that Viksha. They could have jolly well said they didn't do it. That's not his fault. And he was unperturbed. He didn't have any emotional problem with any of the brothers. So he, in a way, is the most suitable candidate. That's one of the reasons why Krishna doesn't choose Yudhishthira to sort of have this dialogue, to explain what is Dharma, even though he was kind of, he's the son of Dharmaraj, Yama. But no, he says it to, Arjuna, because his father Indra is so full of guile and so full of jealousy and stuff like that. But look at the son; he's so pure, Therefore, he had chosen him. So he Gudakesha, Jita Nidraha Ityartha, Ghana Kesha Itiva. Gudakesha, if you mean Guda Kesha, then Kesha, if you Gudaka Isha, then it will become like a person who is a Jita Nidraha. Otherwise, Gudakesha can also mean a person who has very dense hair, beautiful black hair. Maybe he had that. सर्वेषां भूतानाम् आशय अंतर्हृदि स्थितो अहम आत्मा प्रत्यगात्मा नित्यं ध्येयः तद असक्तेन च उत्तरेषु भावेषु चिन्त्यो अहं चिन्तयितुं शक्यो यस्मात् अहम् एव आदिः भूतानां कारणं तथा मध्यं च स्थितिः अन्तः प्रलयश्च. So first he mentions that I am this Nitya Vastu Pratyagatma, I am present in all of you. And then that is how you should meditate on me. But in case you are unable to meditate on me like that, so he's now picking up the middle benchers. And then he says, Uttereshu Bhaveshu, other ways to meditate on me, Chintyo Aham, Chintoitum Shakyo, Yasmat Aham Eva Adihi. So how do you meditate on me? As the beginning and the end, and also the sustainer of these all phenomenal reality. That is what Bhagavan says. I am the guy who is the creator of the samsara. I am the bharta. I maintain it. And I also sort of, this thing kind of falls to pieces. It gets back to its causal form and comes in, gets dissolved in me. Okay? Anta pralayascha. So that is how he explains. And then in the verse number 21st, Adityanam aham Vishnu Jyoti Samra Viram Shuma. We'll go there, but just quickly let's look at how sort of Madhusudana Saraswati explains this couple of lines. Sarvabhutanam ase hriday dese antaryami rupena. I'm the antaryami, inherent, internal, silent witness. Pratyagatma rupena chastitaha. So I'm present all the time. Atma chaitanya ananda ghanaha tvaya aham vasudeva eva iti dheyaha. So you should meditate on me. What? That Sachidananda Rupa Ananda Ghana. Pratik Chaitanya. That is how. But can you do it? Are you sharp enough? That is the question. Eva iti dheyaha. He Gudakesha. Jita Nidra iti. So you're the one who has sort of conquered sleep. Dhyana samarthyam suceyati. This is the beautiful thing. Because you see, we have already studied in chapter 6, where we did a lot of cross reference to Patanjali Yoga Sutras. What was the key two takeaway points? Whenever you sit in meditation, there are two immediate threats to your ability to meditate. What are these? One is laya, you'll fall asleep. And what is the other one? Vikshepa. Laya and a Vikshepa. And we had mentioned the Pancha places and how they are sort of covering these. What are these five places that we had? You remember? We try to remember. So we had these Pancha places. One is for our Nidra is the fifth klesha. And then the other ones, the four that we had discussed, they're Vikshepatmaka. So you have to all the time sort of meditate on this. And that is very, very important. So laya and a Vikshepa. Either you will tend to be drowsy, you'll fall asleep, that is tamasic energy. Or your mind jumps around, that is rajasic energy. What is required for meditation? Sattvic energy. What is that? A balance. How does that happen? You still be stiram sukhamashanam, you quietly sitting, but you are not falling asleep. So never support yourself against a wall when you're doing meditation. You may actually fall asleep. You have some back problem or something, you need a support system. That I agree. But you've got to be very careful to see that you're actually not falling asleep. So it is an important qualification that you have some control over your drowsiness. And that is what Bhagavan is saying. Madhusudana sort of emphasizes that. Because whatever we are discussing from the point of view of our own sadhana. Bhagavan is addressing Krishna, Arjuna is Gudakesha. That means that we sort of try to emulate him, have control over sleep. Evam dhyana samarthyam tu vakshamanani dhyanani karyani. So you have the samarthya, that ability, and what is the product of that particular capacity? Good meditation. Tatra api ado dheyamaha. Now you want to do meditation. So you need something to meditate on. What is that dheya? The focus of meditation. Aham eva adisya utpatihi bhutanam. So I am the beginning point, the causal point of everything that has come into being. Praninam chetana tvena loke vyavahriyamananam madhyavacha. Then once these pranis, all these living beings, they come into picture and they are having sthiti, they have children at a house, and they do some hunting and gathering, all kinds of activities, isn't it? Loke vyavahriyamanam madhyam cha sthitihi antascha. So I am the sthiti, that middle point. Nasah sarvachetana varganam utpatti sthiti nasa rupena tat karana rupena cha aham eva dhyaki. So if you are unable to meditate on me as pratyakatma, antaryami, ever present in all of you, the best place to meditate on me is to actually meditate in your own heart. Think about that heart akasa, the inner universe, and feel me there. But if you are not able to do that, okay, you see me a little external to you, not in the physical universe, but in the causal universe. Subtle, sukshma, but bahi. Because sopadika thing, bhakta bhagavan thing, duality is coming in here. So he's meditating on the Bhagavan as Ishvara, Sarva Srashta, Sarva Niyanta, and then everything sort of, you know, gets destroyed and vanishes back to him. Okay, so that Utpati, Sthiti, and Vilaya or Pralaya. I am the causal form. That's how you can meditate on me. That is what he says in the verse number 20th. And then in the next one, Adityanam aham Vishnu Jyotisham Raviram Shuman Marichir Murtam Asmi Nakshatranam aham Sasihi. And you look at Shankaracharya, doesn't speak much because he will sort of, everyone will kind of will sort of run through it. Evam cha dhyo aham. This is for the adhamas, less intelligent. Adityanam iti. So I am among Adityanam. Dvadasananam, there are 12 Adityas. Vishnu Nama Aditya Aham. I am the Aditya among the 12 Aditya whose name is Vishnu. Jyotisam Ravihi Prakasayitrinam Anshuman. So I'm Anshuman Ravi among all the people who sort of give expression, who are luminous, which eliminate everything else. That's Chaitanya Rupa. So I'm the sun, which sets light on everything. Rashmiman. Marichihi. Marichi Nama Marutam Marudevata Vedana Asmi. So if you look at different types of Marudevatas, I am the one who is Marichi. Nakshatranam Aham Sasi Chandrama, and I am the Chandrama among the Sasis. Now let's look at the details are given a little better in Madhusudana, and let's look at that because you must be a little curious about who is this 12 Adityas and these Marut and why is he called Marut, Marichi and all that. He explains it a little better. Adityanam Dvadasanam Madhya Vishnu, Vishnu Nama Adityo Aham Bhaman Avataro Va. So why Aditya is referring to his own incarnation as Bhamana. You know that short fellow, this dwarf intelligent guy who came to get rid of Vali was very, very, egoistic person. Jyotisam Prakasana Madhye Aham Ravi Amshavan Vishwavyapi Prakashakaha. So I'm the one who sort of illuminate the whole universe. Now let's look at that Adityanam Aham Vishnu. So it's given in the the commentaries and short notes on Madhusudana. So it is said that Aditi and Kashyap, okay, Aditi and Kashyap sort of give birth to Aditya. So the gods which are kind of created, they're born out of Kashyap and Aditi. They are called Aditya, and they are 12. That is what is mentioned in Mahabharata. Who are they? If you want to sort of remember them, otherwise maybe I can just share it in the WhatsApp group. They are Dhatri, Mitra, Aryaman, Sakra, Varuna, Angsha, Bhaga, Vivashvan, Ushan, Savitri, Twastru, or and Vishnu, and that is what is mentioned in Mahabharata. Bhushan is also, it's all referring to Aditya, is kind of sun god. So these are the kinds of Adityas, and amongst them, he is saying that he is Vishnu. His name is Vishnu. Okay, that is how he is mentioned. Jyotisam Prakasanam Madhye Aham Ravi Anshuman Vishwavapi Prakashaka. And all the Jyotisam, whatever is luminous, whatever illuminates this thing, I'm Sarva Vyapi. I pervade everything, eliminate everything. The next one is a little interesting. Marutanam Sapta Saptakanam Madhye Marichinam Aham. I'm Marichi, Marichinam Aham. So what happens is there is a little story, I'll come in there. So what happens is that it is said, and again this is again given in a notes to this particular thing. Somewhere in Rig Veda is mentioned that the Marut, how many are there? How many Maruts are there? And he's saying that somewhere it's mentioned it is 7, somewhere it is mentioned 180. So 60 is mentioned thrice. So one can kind of do some guesswork that 60 thrice is 180. The other places it's called there are 7 Maruts are there. And then these 7 Maruts become 7 times each. They become 49. Okay. So you find a lot of bhakti bhajans. You say there is a mention that unchas pavan, uh, before death. They all sort of ditch you, they go away. Okay. So when all these Marut devatas sort of start glowing, sort of their body sort of falls dead. And there is a lot of mention of that, 49 Vayus or these Marut devatas in different places. How that happens is mentioning here. Now, what happens is that these 7 are mentioned as Avaha, Pravaha, Divaha, Paravaha, Udvaha, Sambaha, or Parivaha. So these are the 7 ones. Okay. Now the whole question is that how did these stories come into picture? It is said that Aditi had a very powerful angelic presence of a son during a state of pregnancy. And you know that Indra, or the god of uh, the king of the gods, he's a very jealous king, isn't he? He's always scared that somebody is going to capture his seat. So he tries to eliminate who may ever pose a threat to him. He recognized that this particular celestial boy who is in pregnancy in Diti, would pose a big threat to him, and he goes very intelligently and quickly and breaks him through his bajra. He bombs him, okay, and sort of turns him into seven pieces. He says she will give birth to seven sons, but then these seven sons will not be powerful enough individually. Together, they might just overpower me. So let them be born as seven, not as one, because then it will be very difficult to deal with that guy. These seven Maruts, then, once they are born, it is mentioned in Vamana Purana, they mention that Indra, when these children kind of became very, started crying. Okay, this little boy, when he entered, he wanted to kill him, and then he was broken into seven pieces. The baby started crying. Why are you hurting me? Then Indra apparently said, Maru Daswa, don't cry, my baby. Look at the cruelty of this guy. He's breaking him into seven pieces. The boy is getting dismembered. He's crying. He's saying, don't cry. And because he says Maru Daswa, he becomes Marud. Don't cry. Like, there are a lot of jokes about it, isn't it? Some children, when they ask in school, what's your name? So the boy says, my name? Oh, my name is Jack Don't, because his mother all the time says, Jack, don't do that, don't do that. He thinks Jack Don't is his, is his name. Similar in Marud. So that's how he sort of thinks that his name is Maru. It's Maru Daswa. That's how it was mentioned to him. That's how they become Marud. So, so you are kind of, I mean, you kind of a stupid thing and don't cry and stuff like that. And these seven Maruts, broken into different Manvantaras, they become 7 into 7, and therefore they become sort of 49, 7 into 7. So Swayambhuvantara, Sorichasantara, Autamantara, Tamasantara, Revatantara, Chakshusantara, Vaivasvatantara. This is how they became 49. Now the Revatantara, that Marichi, the seven Maruts that were there, among them, Marichi was the most powerful. And therefore, Bhagavan says, I am the Marichi among all the 49 Maruts. Why is he saying all this? Because he's talking to some doll students. And the doll students cannot reflect on Bhagavan as Nirupadika Brahman or as Sopadika Eka Ishvara Rupa. That also he cannot. And therefore, he takes interest in all these things. The dull student takes interest in names and forms. And therefore, Bhagavan says, okay, if you want to sort of meditate on the Prana Bayu, or as Bayu Devata, meditate on the Marichi. Because I am that. Nakshitranam aham sasihi. And so, that particular thing is mentioning that Nirdharana Shasti. So, Nirdharana is there are a couple of things. There are so many things out of which you want to choose the best one. Okay, it can be 7 or 6 case in Vibhakti Prakara, whichever way. Like, for example, Nagareshu Dilli, Puspeshu Mali, this is Saptami. That is also Nirdharana Saptami. And then he's mentioning um, Nakshatra Aham Sasi. This is Sasti. So again, Nirdharana. So Nirdharana, you can have 7 case or 6 case. Here it is 6 case. Atra Prayana Nirdharana Sasti. Kvachit Sambandhepi Sasti. Certain signs, like for example, Rajya Putra, Rajaputra, that is Sambandha Sasti, isn't it? There is a particular thing. So he's saying Kvachit Sambandhepi Yatha Bhutanam Asmi Chetano Tyadi. So because in later on he will say that among the Bhutas, I am the Chetan. He will say later on. So what is he? Is he the best Bhuta, the best material being is conscious? Is he saying that? No, no. He's saying Sambandha Sasti. So among all the Bhutas, all the material beings, I'm that consciousness element. That is what will come in the next verse. He's just giving an advance notice that he's going to explain it like that. Vamana Ramadayascha Swo avataraha sarveshwarya salino api aneno rupena dhyana vivakshaya vibhutisu patyante. Even though they are actually his own avatar, isn't it? So when he's saying that I am sort of, Adityanam Aham Vishnu, that is Bhaman avatar. Why is he talking about his own incarnation? He's talking about his greatness, isn't it? Vibhuti is much inferior, just qualities and aspects of him. He's saying no, that's because he's trying to help us how to meditate on him, and therefore he mentioned it, academic point. Vrishninam Vasudeva Asmiti. And what is that Vasudeva? Tena Rupena Dhyana Vivakshya Swasyapi Swavibhuti Madhye Patavat. Like, for example, he says that among the Vishnus, I am Vasudeva. He will say that in a later verse. What is Vishnu? You know, that particular, uh, that royal clan in which he was born. Among all that, I am Vasudeva, he says. And he's saying that he's actually talking about himself, isn't it? Just talking about himself, but it's just a pictorial representation of his greatness for people to be able to meditate on him. Atah paramja prayena ayam adhyayah spastartha iti kvachid kinchid vakyasyama. The Madhusudana is kind of giving us an advance notice, like Lord Krishna says, I'm only going to talk about key, most important points. I'm not going to tell you everything in all detail because we don't have time. Similarly, Madhusudana Saraswati kind of gives us an advance alert saying that, look here, rest of this chapter is very easy because he will be only talking about his material properties, his manifest realities, his manifest faces, and this is not very difficult to sort of make sense. I'll come back and explain to you as and when you require, but I shall not be making very longish commentaries, which perhaps could be very reassuring, isn't it? Sometimes he makes very long commentaries. So this is how the verse number 21 comes to an end. Let's quickly look at verse number 22 because it's so easy and we'll do the meaning, but so obvious. Vedanam samovedosmi, Devanam asmi vasavah, Indriyana manashasmi, Bhutanam asmi chetana. So he's kind of sort of telling how is the excellent, the best among everything that we see. Vedanam Samavedosmi. I'm the Samaveda among these Chaturvedas. Why? He's just mentioning, our friend Madhusudana Saraswati. Gana Madhurjena Atiramaniyaha. Because, Sama is kind of, it's all about musical thing, is it? It's about meters and stuff like that. You are Rig or Chandas. In Chaturveda is all prosaic. It's all kind of descriptive. And Sama is Ganatmaka with a lot of meters and chandas and everything. Sama Vedosmi. Basava Indraha Sarva Devadipati. Devanam Asmi Basava. Basava is Indra. So I am Indra among all the gods. Indriyanam Manachasmi. Among the Indriyas, the five Indriyas, Jnanendriyas and Karma Indriyas. Who is the Preraka? Who is kind of maintaining everything? Who is kind of the trigger for all the Indriyas? Whether the five, uh, you know, means of perception, means of perception or means of action. Jnanendriya and Karmendriya is the mind, which sort of moves everything. Therefore, I am that mana. Bhutanam sarva prani sambandhinam parinamanam madhye chid avivanjika buddhi vritti chetana ahamasmi. So I am that chetana. What is that? I am the intellect. Bhutanam asmi, among the bhutas. But this is what we were just discussing. This is the Sambandha Sasti. He's not saying that all the material beings are the buddhi. No, that's not what is meant here. It's meant that Sambandha Sasti, that I am sort of interconnected with everything that appears and matters here. I'm that consciousness, I'm that buddhi, avivanjika. I sort of express his presence. I create that spurana and everything. So I'm that buddhi. That's what he's mentioning. Chetana ahamashmi. That is the verse number 22nd, and we'll stop here and we'll gather tomorrow to carry it forward. And this is the chapter will sort of, I think, should come to an end rather quickly, even though there are a few more verses because there's nothing very, very difficult to deal with. And I'm sort of putting the YouTube to an end. Any questions you want to ask?